So one of the most common things in the world of riding bicycles is catching a flat. And that's one of the most annoying things, but it's also a really simple fix even when you're roadside. So we thought it'd be a good idea to just do a little tutorial today about how to go about that. So it's a nice day, cool breeze in your hair, you're riding along, wheels going, feeling good about life, just had your coffee, a little donut, booking it up the highway, actually not the highway, okay. And then the inevitable happens. Oh man, caught a flat. But luckily we've had our coffee, we still feel good, and we're going to go ahead and change it and keep rolling. So the first thing we got to do is get this wheel off of this bike. And the best way to do that is to get down to this smallest ring here on your cassette. And then we take our little quick release here, flip it. And the easiest way to drop these wheels out is to just grab your derailleur by the body, push it back, and the wheel will drop right out. So now we've got our wheel in our hand, so what do we do next? Well, we need a few tools. You should always have a little flat repair kit with you if you're riding outside, especially if you're by yourself. Otherwise you'll be calling your grandma to come pick you up or something. So as far as what you will need, first thing is you will need some tire levers, which look like this. You usually get these in a pair. They're very handy and they're necessary. The other thing you will need is some kind of inflation device. You have options there. You can carry a frame pump, but the easier thing to do is to carry a CO2 inflator. It's a lot quicker and it'll get you back on the road instead of having to sit and pump on this guy for 15 minutes. So, alright, so now, another good thing to have is a little shop rag, a little scrap of t-shirt, something like that. We'll explain that in a sec. So, one of the biggest hassles is figuring out, man, how do I get this thing off here? So what you want to do is always, when you start to take the tire off, you always want to work opposite of your valve. So you'll start up here. We'll just call this 12 o'clock. So at 12 o'clock, just start pushing in on the sides and you'll feel the tire unseat. You hear that little popping sound on both sides. And that way now the tire's loose on the rim and we can start to take it off. So what you'll do is you'll take your tire lever, again we're starting at 12 o'clock, completely opposite the valve, and just kind of want to roll it back a little bit and get that lever in there. And then once you get it hooked like that, typically you can just hold it and pull it towards you and it'll come completely off, easy peasy. And once you get one side off, most of the time you can just grab it with your hands and pull it off like this, or if it's real tight on the rim, you just take your lever and get it in on that side. And then once you pop about 3 or 4 inches of it off, then you can just pull it out like that. And then so now what we have is a flat tube, which we don't need. So we just get rid of that. So then the next thing we're going to need is the little rag we talked about. So as far as flats go, there are 2 very common causes. Number 1 is low tire pressure and you'll get a pinch flat. Or number 2, some kind of debris on the road. That's probably more common when you're actually out in the world because most people think to air up their tires. But if you're not one of those people, you should become one of those people. So what we want to do though is take this little rag and get it on the inside here, and we're just going to run it around all the way. And this way, if there's a piece of wire or glass, thorn or whatever, we'll catch it on this rag instead of catching it on our fingers and cutting ourselves. Clean. Alright, so after we get our tire off, what we want to do is take a look at our rim here. The rim strip that runs on the inside, which basically just protects the tube from either the spoke nipples themselves or the holes on a double-walled rim where they're drilled out. So you just kind of want to look all the way around and make sure that this rim strip is covering the entire inside channel of the rim. All looks good. So now we are ready to get our stuff back together. So what we want to do is start by getting one side of the tire back on the rim. So this time what we're going to do is our 12 o'clock is actually where the spoke or the valve stem actually goes through the rim. What I always like to do is line the label up with that, and what that does is give you a reference point. So if you have continuous flat problems, you can always kind of reference it by, well, I keep getting a flat, I know that my valve is oriented here. You can trace it back around and figure out where it is. So what you want to do is just get it kind of hooked up here and then just work it around with your fingers. Flip it over, and you can usually get this one side on without any trouble with just your hands. But now what we need is a spare tube. Got it. And so we've got our CO2 inflator, is what we're going to call it. And what you want to do is put just enough air in the tube to give it a little shape. And at this point, get our tube lined up here. And again, we're starting with the valve. So what you want to do is just get the valve in through the rim. You probably lose a little bit of air, no big deal. As long as it's still got a little bit of shape to it, that's all we're looking for. And so now what we're going to do is get the tube inside the carcass of the tire by working it around this way. So usually what I'll do is I'll start on one side, go up to, you know, about midway, and then start on the other side, and go up all the way around. Just makes life a little easier. And then what you want to do is just kind of run your fingers in there and just push the tire to where it's actually in the channel of the rim and not just riding inside the tire where it's still hanging off the rim. At this point, what we want to do is get our tire set back here. So you want to just kind of catch this hook right around the valve stem, and then use your hand kind of like a pipe wrench and just kind of work it all the way around. And you can usually get your tire back on the rim without even using tools. And if you do need to use a tool, you can just use your tire lever and just pop it in there like that. But this guy's going on pretty easy, so. And if you're working with a Presto valve, you have your little nut there. And all this little nut does actually is keeps you from pushing the valve into the rim whenever you're putting your inflation device on it. So we've got our CO2 simulator here, also known as an air compressor. Okay. You hear it popping all the way around. That's just the tire seating on the rim. And so it's not completely inflated right now, but we've got enough in it to make sure that it's actually sat all the way around and that it's not kind of sideways. So usually what I'll do is just take it in your hands and spin it and just take a look, and you just want to make sure that it's rolling smooth and that you don't see the tire kind of knocking to one side in one place or another. And if you do see that, you just kind of take a look at it and see where it may look like it's a little bit sunk in on one side or the other, and let a little bit of air out. And usually you can just take it with your hands and roll it back into place, and then you re-inflate it. And so at this point, we're ready to get back on the bike. So put it on exactly the opposite of taking it off. Pull your derailleur cage back, and that tire should slip right up in there. Get our quick release tight. Always check the alignment. You can usually check that against your brakes if your brakes are set correctly. Just make sure there's an equal gap on either side. And then I usually look down here, kind of just down the seat tube, and make sure that the tire's lined up with it, that it's not kind of cocked one way or another. That's a good indicator that you actually got it in your dropouts like you're supposed to. And a good idea, since we dropped it down to the small chainring, is just shift up a couple of times. And then that way when you hop on the bike and take off again, you're not in the hardest gear, you know, so it's a little easier to get back on the takeoff. So at that point, what we would want to do is just top off your air with however much PSI you need, and then you're ready to ride again, off into the sunset. So.